to another edition of GovTech Today. I'm Russell Lowery.
And I'm Jen Saha.
And together we're going to try and bridge the gap between .com and .gov. Today we're teeing up an issue, the broadband, and specifically broadband access for every Californian. Can you start with maybe what is the government's policy with regard to broadband access?
So bridging that digital divide is something that's probably been talked about related to government for a decade, maybe since the internet existed. And recent through COVID really highlighted the need for this. We had our state CIO uses the example of kids having to go to a McDonald's to have broadband internet access to log on to school during the pandemic, and sitting in their cars at McDonald's to be able to attend school. It just sort of highlights that not everybody has this utility, this what I think of as like a public utility. So there have been huge investments in this from a federal level as well as state dollars that go towards it. And we have an incredibly large initiative happening at the state of California, Broadband for All, and everyone's sort of driving towards that goal.
Help me understand, if you can, if cell phone adoption is nearly ubiquitous and you can kind of log on and surf the internet, watch your TikTok video from your telephone. Why do we have to have this massive investment in high-speed internet access?
Because the costs aren't as sort of equal, and that different providers, different carriers have the ability to segment off what they offer and what they don't. It has to be profitable for them. And so when you inject a ton of public dollars, you're helping to bridge that gap to where it makes it economically feasible to sort of reach these very, very hard to reach places.
So broadband access is really about bridging it for people who the market is not meeting. So if I'm in an urban center, I'm a business in an urban core, and I've got millions of population, private sector carriers are competing to build the infrastructure to deliver me services. But if I'm maybe in a rural area or a poor community, I'm not going to be buying all of the packages and things that make it profitable, so they won't necessarily build the infrastructure.
Right.
And so the idea is that the government is going to subsidize that infrastructure in order to bring those services to a less wealthy or less lucrative market.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, you have to, it's expensive to lay this fiber, to lay this connection to homes. And we're not even talking about incredibly rural. My aunt lives right outside of Yuba City, but still doesn't have high-speed internet in her home. So she's working off of, she ended up buying satellite internet because it was the only thing that she could get out there at a reasonable price. So it's just a cost-benefit analysis for these companies. They're all in it to make a profit. They're a private sector company, and it isn't profitable to lay that wire everywhere in the state.
Got it. So I think we've painted a picture of what the issue is. What can you tell us about the government's plan to bridge that gap? What does that look like today?
So the state of California has teamed up a few departments to work on this. Our Department of Technology is the lead. They have an entire broadband office that's sort of quarterbacking this. They're working with our Public Utilities Commission, as well as our Department of Transportation. Their role in this, honestly, they have an incredible highway network around the state, even in those rural areas. Which means land and property and right-of-ways that could potentially be used to actually dig the trenches to place some of this.
Okay, so it's quarterbacked by the Department of Technology, and so you've got, I've seen the report, read the report from Amy Tong that is doing a report to the legislature. So you've got legislative eyes on this. They've passed some initiatives, and then the governor also has an executive order on the issue, and so that brings all the alphabet soup agencies together. But Amy Tong has some experience in these complicated technology projects. What are we rolling out between these three different agencies that's going to have a make a difference, hopefully in our lifetime?
Well, and there's sort of a fourth too,
Okay.
and that is the federal government. Federal government regulates broadband across the United States. They're also putting some money into this in a big way too. So I think they really need to be looked at as the fourth, leg of that stool, if you
Okay.
will. But as it relates to sort of what we're aiming to do in California, is that middle mile. So not your cities. We're
Okay.
not gonna, make every city 5G. We are looking at sort of how do you get that middle part that maybe isn't profitable for the industry to do on their own, and how can you bridge that with public funding and public infrastructure to make it more profitable for them?
So, how does public infrastructure work? When I think of internet access, you've got internet service providers, you got all the telecoms. It's such a competitive landscape. If the government is participating in building the infrastructure, who owns it? Who gets access? What kinds of services are going to be offered to the public?
So it's definitely, I don't know if we'll end up at a place where we have CalNet internet option. I do think that all of the carriers and all of the providers are close partners in all of this. And you'll probably actually see some of them getting awards for chunks of this money to sort of get us to a place where it is sort of treated as a public utility in a lot of the ways that, like, our energy is regulated, but PG needs its own thing. Same sort of concept, I think, is where we'll land with a lot of the broadband.
Oh, that's radically different business model than it has existed before. In that, in a competitive marketplace, they've got to earn that dollar, and they're competing to deliver services. And the money they raise for the infrastructure, they have to earn a return on that in order to get people to buy their stock. They're paying a dividend. If the government is a partner on that infrastructure, um, is the is the government going to have a say in how much I charge for my streaming service, or who has access to that product? Some thorny legislative issues or regulatory issues to be worked out, I'm sure.
Certainly. And a big focus of all of these dollars has been equity, right? Are we reaching the people that maybe can't afford it, as opposed to the people that can, but they just don't want to pay for it, type of thing? So, looking at diversity, equity, in how these funds are distributed, and making sure that everyone who needs it is able to get their fair share here.
When I think about from a policy standpoint, rural communities is what I have in mind. Your connection outside of Yuba City, um, the individual, having access to TikTok or watching Netflix and not have to wait for the movie to download without it being glitchy, or that sort of thing, is seems less urgent than, say, telehealth access, and they need it in order to access healthcare in the 21st century, or economic opportunities associated with uh, an AI boom, or data centers, or uh, those sort of economic activity that might derive around that. Uh, are local communities going to be engaging in who has access, what it costs, that sort of thing? Or is that more to be developed and we're worried about the infrastructure right now? Is
Local communities are highly engaged and involved on this, and in many cases are competing for grant funding, whether it's for technical assistance. The tribes also have a huge role here. They own a lot of land in
right.
the state of California, so involving them has been a big step forward in addressing some of these issues. But it's going to be one of those sort of sticky widgets in that you're bringing all of these people together. They all have different economic interests. They all want something out of this, and you have a huge chunk of money at the middle. And as to how those decisions are made around how you're distributing it, who gets what, and who doesn't get anything out of it, it's going to be very politically sticky, and frankly already has been up until today.
So, if we're talking about billions of dollars of infrastructure, public private partnerships, there's got to be a bit of a feeding frenzy going on. Where are we at in the process of that money hitting the street?
In progress.
Okay.
Some of these grants have already gone out. The PUC's sort of quarterbacking a lot of the grants that are going to locals, and they've been doing that through the past year and a half. They have gotten money out fairly
Is
quickly.
that for planning and or
Planning, training, we need to build a map where we're going to map everywhere that broadband is going to be laid. And they've worked with local communities. People have said, we don't want it here, we want it there. There have been public comments and everything, but we're to the point today where there is a map. Like, I can go on and see exactly where that broadband line is going to be laid, and will it get to that corner of Yuba City that's going to benefit people that need it. And we're getting to the point, I think, especially with COVID highlighting it, where it isn't just I want to watch my TikToks or I want to watch Netflix. It's, can I work?
uh,
For a lot of people who remote work or hybrid work, that's the game changer for them, is having high-speed internet at their homes. Like, you can't work from home if you don't have high-speed internet. You can't do remote learning if you don't have high-speed internet. So it becomes a public utility in a lot of ways that I am entitled to as a resident in the state of California.
so with those equity issues and the dollars on the street, is there what's the process for and the timeline for when we might see shovels moving or projects being awarded? What is this, a distant future or is it around the corner?
So, middle mile broadband initiative, which is going to be the majority of these funds literally laying, the equipment around it, the trenches being dug. Those awards for equipment are expected to be made relatively quickly.
Okay.
Kind of any day now
Okay.
is what I'm hearing. Those are going to be big. It's going to be around $200 million just for the equipment to do this project. And there aren't many people out there that can deliver on that kind of contract either. I mean, you have to have a lot of equipment to be able to sell a lot of equipment. So they are working on that, and it's underway right now. We've got the maps, we know where we're going to dig, we're buying the equipment, and we're going to be shovels in ground ready to dig on a large majority of this. They've already started in some areas too. There is a last mile. So this is the super rural. It's not even close to economically feasible. And that one includes $2 billion for investment in last mile initiatives. And that a lot of that will go towards local agencies. So maybe we're going to work through counties to get that done in some of these more rural areas of California. And that's to come. They're focused right now on that middle mile broadband initiative, and it's going to be big. There's, in the state alone, $3.25 billion for that middle mile infrastructure planning, all of that good stuff that's underway as we speak.
Well, in a complicated process, Secretary Tong has shown a willingness to depart from the ordinary procurement process. And some of that stuff is ongoing right now. What is the process that's currently underway?
So they've developed a special procurement office specifically for broadband. They've waived a lot of the normal reviews. It's got to go through all of these different people for this money. Because if you put $6 billion into the state's traditional procurement procedures, you will not get this built before the federal money expires.
Got it.
So they have had to make a lot of changes to the way this money is being spent, even down to we are going to work with locals to expedite plan review because it can't sit in a county's planning office for 4 months to be approved. So it's partnership with the locals and then partnership among our state departments and agencies. They went to Caltrans, who is very familiar with infrastructure, digging, tractors, public works type of construction, and asked them, can you guys be the quarterbacks for this portion of it? You know how to dig trenches.
Right.
So Caltrans is on the hook for those contracts and for finding us people that can do it from their standpoint. And then DGS is also involved here. We're making sure we're not breaking any laws.
Sure.
It's just specifics related to how we move these particular funds really quickly. I mean, it's $6 billion. It's pretty massive when you consider the state in a normal year invests around 12, 13 billion in technology, period. Now you're funneling an extra 2 to 3 billion a year over the life of these projects. It's substantial. So these departments have also staffed up and hired people specifically to focus on these projects.
Well, it sounds like it's good right now, and there's more to come. I know I saw, and we maybe don't have time to go into it. Maybe we put a plug in it for next time. But the state's also opened up an RFI-2 process, looking for some solutions for some of the harder to reach areas.
I love that. And you're right. The RFI-2 process, we'll go into it deeper because it's a really cool, innovative way of buying things. And I think we're going to see it applied here. For instance, I know we never plug specific companies, but an employee of mine has Starlink, and he is able to camp in the middle of the desert and have high-speed internet that's faster than his internet at home in Elk Grove in the middle of the desert because of Starlink and the capabilities there. So I think all of that is on the table. It has to be cost-effective, but the state's looking for solutions, and they're turning to the industry to help them with that, and that's the beauty of the RFI squared.
Well, I love the idea of defining the problem and letting the private sector offer a variety of different solutions. I'm glad they're using it for this one. I look forward to learning more about that RFI-2 process and maybe how we can apply it to more and more problems.
Everything, right?